They laughed at the broke drifter, at a luxury car showroom. They didn't know he was a war hero worth millions. "Get your grubby little mitts off my car," the salesman barked. "It's a Lamborghini, not a dumpster truck." "I just wanted to rent it," Brian softly replied. "I wanted to surprise a friend with something special." "Guys like you don't drive cars like this. You clean them," the salesman sneered. "Maybe rent out a dumpster truck." He gave Brian a once-over. Scuffed boots, army fatigue pants, a faded olive green t-shirt, and quiet defiance. "Why don't you show some respect and do your damn job?" Brian said, holding his ground. "You're a salesman, right? Now show me the car." "Piss off, loser," the salesman spat. "I work for people who can afford luxury, not for a broke-ass nobody like you." "You can't talk to me like that," Brian shot back. "I serve this country." "Oh yeah?" the salesman sneered, pulling out a $100 bill from his pocket. He held it straight in Brian's face and said, "And now you serve Benjamin Franklin like the rest of us. Now, piss off." Brian stood silent, eyes locked on the salesman. "I could take this asshole out with just one punch," he thought. That's when he heard a voice from behind him. "Is that how you treat our heroes? People who have served?" Brian turned and saw him. An older man stood near the showroom entrance, quietly commanding the space. Tailored coat, silver hair, calm, assessing eyes. It was Robert Hart, the billionaire industrialist whose name carried weight far beyond this showroom. A man used to being obeyed without asking. "Mr. Hart," the salesman said, startled. "He is a nobody." Suddenly, Brian sensed something was not right. He felt the jade pendant slung on his neck, tucked under his jumpsuit, go warm and glow. Outside the showroom door, Hart's security was scrambling, talking into their headsets. Then they fell to the ground. The showroom glass doors exploded inward. Gunfire ripped through the expensive cars. People screamed and dropped to the floor. The salesman slipped on the wet marble and crashed hard. Two masked men stormed into the showroom, weapons raised. They were going for Hart. Brian knew it as they approached him with their guns raised. Brian lunged forward, grabbing the mop from the floor. He moved with practiced precision, using the wooden handle to knock the first gun off target and wrench it free. The weapon skidded across the marble. The second masked man turned toward Hart. Brian stepped in, the mop striking fast and controlled, driving the attacker back and sending him crashing to the floor. The first man rushed him barehanded. One sharp strike and he went down. Silence. Brian planted the mop upright, its wet strands dripping onto the marble like nothing had happened. Security burst in, weapons raised. Hart's backup had arrived. Robert Hart stood untouched, staring at the scene. Two armed men downed by a janitor with a mop. Hart looked at Brian. "Where did you serve?" he asked Brian. "Fallujah, sir," Brian replied, still scanning the scene. "2 tours." Robert Hart studied the mop, the soaked uniform, the calm breathing. "You disarmed 2 armed men without a weapon," Hart continued. "They don't teach that in the military. That skill was something else." Brian said nothing. "You are worth more than a janitor's pay," Hart said, looking at him. "Probably millions." "Millions?" Brian looked at Hart, examining him. The salesman's jaw was on the floor. Hart reached into his coat and produced a black visiting card, placing it into Brian's hand instead of offering it. "I'm offering you a job," Hart said. "One that pays millions." Brian stiffened. Hart leaned in slightly. "This isn't the place for details. Come to my estate tomorrow. If you don't like the terms, you walk away." A pause. "If you do," Hart added, turning away, "your life changes." He took 2 steps, then stopped. "The job comes with a condition," Hart said over his shoulder. "It's not going to be easy, and you will need to relocate." And with that, Robert Hart walked away, already certain Brian would come. Brian stood alone for a moment, the noise of the showroom closing in around him. The city lights blurred past the bus window as Brian sat near the back, Hart's black card resting heavy in his pocket. $1 million. The words didn't excite him the way they should have. They felt distant, unreal. By the time he stepped off at Chinatown, the night had cooled. The familiar smell of street food, incense, and damp concrete wrapped around him like a memory. Brian pushed open the door to the small apartment above the herbal shop. The familiar scent of dried roots and medicinal oils greeted him. Samuel Lynn, Brian's mentor and guardian, sat at the wooden table under a single hanging bulb, grinding herbs with slow, practiced movements. His back was straight, but the years showed in the pauses between breaths. This was the man who had raised him, trained him, and broken him down and rebuilt him more times than Brian could count. "You're home late," Mr. Lin said without looking up. Brian set his bag down. Something happened. Mr. Lin's hands stopped. He finally looked up, eyes sharp, missing nothing. "Sit!" Brian obeyed. He reached into his pocket and placed the black card on the table. Mr. Lin didn't touch it. He only glanced once before exhaling softly. "Robert Hart," he said. "You know Robert Hart?" Brian questioned. "Everyone knows Robert Hart, Mr. Lin replied. "Few understand him." Brian leaned forward. "He offered me a job, a real one." Mr. Lin raised an eyebrow. "And? $1 million? Silence. Mr. Lin didn't smile, didn't react. Instead, he coughed, harder than before. He turned slightly, pressing a hand to his chest until the fit passed. Brian stood immediately. "You shouldn't be pushing yourself." "I'm not dying tonight," Mr. Lin said dryly. "Sit down." Brian hesitated, then did. "He wants me to relocate," Brian said. "Tomorrow. Says he'll explain the terms at his estate." Mr. Lin nodded once. "Of course he will." Brian lowered his voice. "I don't want to leave you like this." Mr. Lin studied him for a long moment. "You didn't train for years," Mr. Lin said calmly. "Disciplining your body, sharpening your mind, learning control under pressure, just to end up mopping floors forever." Brian clenched his jaw. "You trained me to serve my country, not to serve billionaires." "Mr. Lin stood slowly and walked to the window. "You left service to take care of me." Mr. Lin said, "I don't want you to become an old man like me, filled with regret." He turned to Brian and said firmly, "You've proven yourself. I prepared you for this." Brian swallowed. "Hart isn't like the people you prepared me for." "No," Mr. Lin agreed. "He's more dangerous." Mr. Lin stepped closer. "The rich don't play fair. Their generosity is calculated. Their kindness always costs something." "I know," Brian said. "Do you?" Mr. Lin asked quietly. Brian didn't answer. Finally, he stood. "When I become a millionaire," he said, voice steady, "I'll come back for you." Mr. Lin shook his head. "Don't come back because of money." Brian met his eyes. "Come back because you survived." Mr. Lin placed a hand on Brian's shoulder. "Go, and remember, never mistake opportunity for safety." Brian nodded once. Outside, the city hummed, and somewhere beyond it, Robert Hart was waiting. Mr. Lin waved goodbye to Brian as he got on the train and said, "Trust your jade pendant, Brian. It will guide you." As Brian settled in the seat in his army fatigues, trying to fill in the shoes of an ex-military as his pitch for the job to Hart, he had no idea what was waiting for him. That one mistake could cost him millions. Everything. When he arrived at Robert Hart's mansion, Brian was absolutely stunned. The towering skyscrapers and sleek modern architecture stood before him. The luxury and grandeur were almost unreal, and for a brief moment, Brian wondered if he'd somehow stepped into a different world altogether. Unsure of how to get to Mr. Hart's office, he approached two security guards standing by the entrance. "Excuse me, which way is Mr. Hart's office?" The main security guard raised an eyebrow, sizing Brian up. "Mr. Hart? You mean the Robert Hart? The chairman of this entire empire?" Brian nodded, a little more confidently now. "Yeah, he invited me here on special business." Both guards let out a short laugh. "Maybe he's here to beg for leftovers. Look at him. Scuffed boots, army fatigue pants. Looks like he hasn't had a proper meal in days," said the other guard mockingly. The main guard shook his head. "And he says Mr. Hart invited him? What? Did you find that invite in a dumpster?" The guards continued their mocking laughter. Brian, frustrated, was about to say something when suddenly a voice from behind called out, "Brian? Brian Woods?" The guards turned, surprised. It was Albert Bennett, the Hart family butler. Albert was almost family to the Harts. In Robert's absence, he'd often even leave Albert in charge of his decision-making. "Let him in, you goons! Mr. Hart invited him personally." The guards stepped aside, looking at each other, still puzzled. What could a billionaire want with this kid? Albert smiled apologetically as he approached Brian. "I'm terribly sorry about that, Brian. I was just about to head out to pick you up. No need to apologize." "I made it here just fine," Brian replied with a half grin, still processing everything. "That you did. Let me take your bags. Mr. Hart's office is just this way." As they walked down the corridor, Brian couldn't help but feel his heart race. This was it. He was about to meet someone who could change his life forever. When they arrived at Mr. Hart's office, Brian was almost starstruck. The office itself looked more like a boardroom from a high-budget movie. The luxury, sleek lines, the massive windows showing a breathtaking view of the city, it all seemed unreal. Meeting Mr. Hart for the first time, Brian instinctively bowed as soon as he saw him, remembering what Mr. Lin had taught. Mr. Hart seemed a little caught off guard. As he moved forward, he said, "You look younger than your age, Brian, and that's why I picked you for the job." Brian felt a little weird. He thought he was picked because of his fighting skills. He stayed silent. Hart's eyes were scanning him for reaction as he said, "If you succeed in what I'm about to ask, you won't have to worry about money ever again. You will walk out a millionaire." Brian tried to imagine $1 million pile of money. That's when Hart added, "All your expenses will be covered by us. You know, for your school supplies, assignments, and other expenses." Brian's eyes widened. "Wait, school supplies? Assignment? I don't—" Mr. Hart chuckled, shaking his head. "Right, I almost forgot. You're going to be my daughter's secret bodyguard." Brian blinked, still processing. "Oh, you'll attend the same college as her, Maple Grove Design School, and live in her guest house," Mr. Hart continued. "I chose you because you look young enough to blend in, no suspicion, no raised eyebrows. To everyone else, you'll just be another student in her social circle. But no one can know you're there to protect her. You'll just be her study buddy. Got it?" "Got it," Brian said, his excitement bubbling up despite his confusion. "I don't know how to thank you for this opportunity, sir." Mr. Hart's smile grew a little more serious. "There's one condition," he said firmly. "My daughter Stella does not know she needs protection, and she does not trust strangers. She has already gotten 3 bodyguards fired." Then he chuckled and added, "She is a fiery one." Brian's brows creased as he thought, "How am I supposed to do that? Convince a brat that she needs protection?" Then Hart delivered his condition. "So here is my offer to you, Brian. If she accepts you as her bodyguard and she trusts you, you can be a millionaire." Brian swallowed. "If she rejects you," Mr. Hart continued, "the deal is off. But don't worry, you will get time to prove yourself." Brian couldn't shake the feeling. Was the mission really this simple? Just to convince a girl to be her bodyguard? "Keeping my daughter safe is the most important thing in the world," Mr. Hart added. "I'm afraid she's in a lot of danger." Mr. Hart stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "Albert will take you to her mansion and introduce you. Good luck, Brian. I hope what I've seen in you is true." As Mr. Hart rushed off to a conference room, Albert guided Brian out toward the car. As they walked, Albert leaned in slightly, giving Brian a stern warning. "Miss Stella isn't exactly easy to get along with. She can be difficult, especially with new people." But Brian was too overjoyed to take the warning seriously. "I'm sure I can handle it. How hard can it be?" Brian sat in the passenger seat of the sleek black car, arms resting over his worn duffel bag. The ragged army fatigues on his body felt heavier than usual as the road leading to Stella Hart's mansion appeared. Everything about the place screamed perfection. The mansion's iron gates opened silently, revealing manicured lawns trimmed to surgical precision, marble pathways that gleamed under the afternoon sun. White stone walls rose elegantly, framed by sculpted hedges and glass balconies that reflected the sky. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a monument. Brian ran a hand through his hair and exhaled slowly. "Yeah, definitely not my world." Albert Bennett glanced at him from the driver's seat, calm as ever. "You'll recognize Miss Hart right away," he said. "She has a presence." Brian smirked faintly. "Not one to blend in, huh?" Albert's expression hardened. "She doesn't take kindly to anything she didn't personally choose. And right now," he paused, "you're not her choice." Brian nodded. No surprise there. They got out of the car and Albert led the way inside. The doors opened without a sound. Cool air brushed Brian's skin, carrying the faint scent of polished wood and something floral, expensive, subtle. The foyer opened upward with impossibly high ceilings crowned by a chandelier that looked more like a sculpture than a light. Brian slowed. He'd seen big houses before. This wasn't that. This was a statement. Albert moved as if none of it was remarkable. "This way," he said, already heading toward the staircase. Brian followed, eyes tracking everything. They reached the upper floor, and Albert stopped before a set of double doors and opened them. "This will be your room." Brian stepped inside. The guest room was larger than his entire apartment back home. Then Albert crossed the room to open a huge closet. "This would be your closet," he said. "All designer clothes. Mr. Hart arranged it." Brian blinked. "A whole closet. New clothes." The visual hit harder than he expected. Clean, untouched. His grin came quick and then disappeared just as fast. "No," he said. Albert glanced over. "No?" "Loose hoodie. Cargo pants," Brian replied. "Cheap, practical. I can move in them." "These clothes would better match the social circle you would try to be a part of," Albert said. "That's the problem," Brian answered. "I'm not here to match anything. Mission first, vanity later." Albert studied him for a beat, then said, "You know, I was like you once. I had nothing before the Harts took me in." "I am just here till I get paid," Brian said, smiling at him. Albert seemed like a nice guy. He nodded at Brian. "Good luck with your $1 million, he said. Brian stepped back into the hall, duffel still slung over his shoulder, when a sharp voice cut through the air. "Who the hell are you? Where's security?" He looked up as a girl stormed toward him. Golden hair, sharp posture, the kind of confidence that assumed ownership of every room she entered. Brian clocked her instantly. That must be Stella. She stared at him like he was a stain on the marble floor. "Who let you in?" she snapped. "Security!" Brian didn't answer. He just stood there. Albert hurried towards the stairs. "Miss Stella, this is Brian Woods, as your father instructed." "No," Stella cut him off flat. "Absolutely not." Her eyes dragged over Brian, his worn army jacket, the duffel, the calm expression that somehow made her angrier. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered. "This is the bodyguard my father sent?" Brian raised an eyebrow. "I thought he had standards." Albert stayed steady. "Your father was quite serious, Miss Stella." She scoffed. "He looks like he crawled out of a basement." "Not a basement," Brian said calmly. "Chinatown." She turned sharply on Albert. "Take him back." "I'm your bodyguard," Brian said evenly. "A secret one, and I'm not going anywhere." That earned a full look. Albert stepped forward. "Mr. Hart's orders are clear. Brian will attend your college and remain by your side at all times." "That's insane," Stella snapped. "I'm afraid," Albert said. "His decision is final." Silence. Then the door opened again. Harper walked in, hazel hair loose, eyes curious, energy lighter than the tension in the room. She glanced between Stella and Brian. "What's going on?" Harper asked. Stella pointed at Brian without even looking at him. "My dad hired that to keep an eye on us. Look at him. He probably dug those clothes out of a trash heap." Brian clenched his jaw. "I thought I was supposed to be a secret. And he thinks he can follow me everywhere," Stella continued. "All my friends are going to laugh at me." "He doesn't seem that bad," Harper said, studying Brian. "He's actually kind of cute." "Then you keep him," Stella snapped. "I would," Harper replied, "but he's here to protect you, not me." Stella laughed coldly. "This guy? Protection? I bet he'd hide behind the couch the moment he meets Phantom." Brian didn't move. "Phantom!" Stella called. A massive Rottweiler padded down the stairs and stopped beside her, dark eyes locked on Brian, growling low. "If you try anything funny," Stella said smugly, "he'll rip you to shreds." Brian met the dog's stare, steady and unbothered. Harper frowned. "He seems fine to me, Stell." Stella smiled thinly. "Great, I have 2 dogs now." She clapped once. "Come on, Harper, get ready. We're going to a party." Albert cleared his throat. "Brian will need to accompany you." Stella's jaw tightened. She turned slowly, eyes raking over Brian from head to toe before she shot back. "Not in these clothes, he won't." She pointed at him sharply. "Go and change into something people can look at without gagging." Brian didn't get a chance to respond. The moment he stepped forward, Stella grabbed his sleeve. "Unbelievable," she muttered, already dragging him toward the stairs. "This is officially the worst thing my father's ever done." Brian followed without resistance. The assignment had officially begun. The party floor throbbed with life. Neon tubes ran along the ceiling beams, washing the open-plan hall in electric blues and violets. Bass-heavy music rattled the glass shelves behind the bar, vibrating up through the polished concrete floor. Students packed the space shoulder to shoulder, designer outfits, careless laughter, phones raised like status badges, Maple Grove in its natural habitat. Brian stood at the bar's edge, a step removed from the chaos. No hoodie tonight, just a clean, fitted shirt, plain, intentional, no logos, no effort to impress. He didn't look out of place because of what he wore. He looked out of place because he wasn't performing. His attention stayed forward. Stella Hart sat in the VIP lounge area just beyond the dance floor, legs crossed, soda in hand. Relaxed in posture only. Her eyes moved slowly, measuring people, conversations, exits. She wasn't attending the party. She was enduring it. Harper Adams leaned against the armrest beside her, phone half lit, scrolling without interest, bored but alert. The kind of bored that still clocked who entered and who left. Brian watched without staring, enough to do his job. Brian? No way. He turned. Luke Hartley pushed through the crowd, surprise written all over his face. Brian recognized him instantly, the boy he'd met on the train to Aspen Hills, on his way to meet Robert Hart. Same awkward grin, same I don't belong here energy. Didn't expect to see you here, Brian said. Luke laughed, glancing around the party floor. Same. This place feels like a fashion launch. He leaned closer to be heard over the music. So, what are you doing at a Maple Grove party? I go here. Luke blinked. Seriously? Yeah. Luke followed Brian's line of sight toward the VIP lounge. His voice dropped instinctively. You know them? Unfortunately. Luke nodded. Stella Hart, Harper Adams, untouchables. Brian exhaled through his nose. Oh, great. Luke's eyebrows shot up. Yeah, but if you want to survive here, you gotta know who's who. Brian took a sip of his drink. All right, enlighten me. Luke grinned. Stella's old money, power family. No one crosses her. Then, quieter. Harper's different. Rumor says her brother's ex-military. The dangerous kind. Brian paused. Luke nodded emphatically. Yeah, exactly. Means you don't mess with her unless you want a guy who knows how to break bones showing up at your door. Brian absorbed it without comment. Good to know. That's when a hand landed on Luke's shoulder. They turned and saw Peter standing close. Peter, the spoiled trust fund brat from Maple Grove, stood too close, designer jacket, glassy eyes, alcohol on his breath. Entitlement radiated off him. Nathan and Mason, his equally spoiled hangers-on, flanked him, silent and smug. You! Peter said, his breath stinking with alcohol. You don't belong here. This is a party for people with class. Luke straightened. I go to Maple Grove. I've got every right to be here. Peter scoffed. This party isn't for dumpster kids. He shoved Luke hard enough to draw eyes. Before Luke could react, Brian stepped between them. Calm, controlled. That enough? Brian asked. Peter laughed, looking him up and down. Who the hell are you? Another dumpster kid? I go to Maple Grove too, Brian replied evenly. A ripple moved through the nearby crowd. Peter spread his arms theatrically. I run this place. You disrespect me. Brian cut in, voice dry. Funny. Kings usually don't need an audience to feel important. Laughter broke out, small at first, then louder. Peter's smile snapped. He swung. Brian sidestepped easily, caught Peter's wrist, twisted just enough. Peter stumbled back into a table, glasses rattling. Peter had no idea who he was messing with, a highly trained ex-military man. Nathan charged. Brian swept his legs out from under him. Nathan hit the floor hard. Mason hesitated, then rushed in. Brian caught him mid-step and shoved him into Peter. Both went down in a messy heap near the bar. Phones came up and cheers rippled. Brian stood untouched. Peter dragged himself upright, face flushed with humiliation. You think this makes you tough? Brian rolled his shoulders. No, I think it makes you loud. Peter's hand slipped into his jacket. The knife flashed under the neon light. The music cut abruptly. Someone killed the track. The party floor fell into a stunned hush. Stella and Harper were on their feet now, having pushed through the crowd. Stella's jaw tightened. He's here because of me, she thought, irritation and responsibility colliding. This is going to end badly, Stella said flatly. Peter always wins these things. Harper glanced at Brian. You sure? Look at him, Stella replied. Peter's been doing this since freshman year. He won't last. Luke stepped forward, voice shaking. Peter, knife in a fist fight? Let's not do this. Peter shoved Luke aside and charged. Brian moved first, a sharp pivot, wrist control and a clean twist. Peter screamed as the knife hit the floor, skidding across the polished floor. Brian held Peter's arm locked behind him, voice low and steady. "You like calling yourself king?" Peter gasped, panic replacing arrogance. "Tell me who you bullied," Brian continued. "Who do you owe apologies to?" "I'm sorry," Peter choked. "I'm sorry, please." Brian released him and stepped back. Peter collapsed to the floor, clutching his arm. The crowd slowly backed away, shaken. Whispers replaced cheers. Harper let out a short breath, a half-smile tugging her lips. "Guess he's capable." "Shut up," Stella muttered, already turning away. She didn't look back, but her expression wasn't indifferent anymore. Brian noticed anyway. Luke exhaled, laughing weakly. Man, they were totally watching. Brian glanced once toward the retreating figures. "Yeah? Who?" Luke grinned. "Stella and Harper, man. The hottest girls in this place." They moved toward the exit, weaving through parted bodies. After the party, Brian, Stella, and Harper returned to Stella's mansion. Brian lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. An unfamiliar quiet pressed in on him, the kind that made instincts itch. He shifted onto his side, fingers brushing the jade pendant resting against his chest. It was warm, and suddenly it glowed. A faint pulsing green light seeped through the fabric of his hoodie. Brian stiffened. He heard footsteps coming from downstairs. Brian slid off the bed, silent, every muscle tightening as he crept into the hallway. His hand hovered near his side, ready to strike. He reached the staircase just as a shadow moved in the kitchen, and then Brian lunged. "Whoa!" Harper nearly jumped out of her skin. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "Trying to kill me?" Brian froze mid-motion, blinking. "You?" Harper clutched her chest. "Yes, me." "What? Were you expecting an assassin at 3 in the morning?" Brian exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck. "I heard someone moving around." "Well, congratulations, you caught me." She crossed her arms. "I'm hungry." Brian stared at her blankly. "That's it?" "Obviously." She yawned. "Parties burn calories." He sighed. "The kitchen's stocked. You can cook," Harper interrupted. "You can cook," Brian scoffed. "I'm Stella's bodyguard, not your personal chef." "Relax," she said lightly. "I'm not asking for a 5-course meal, just something warm." Brian hesitated for a second but agreed. "Fine, I'll cook for you." Harper grinned. "Knew you'd cave." She leaned back in a dining chair, watching Brian retreat into the kitchen. A sly smile tugged at her lips. Brian, meanwhile, was standing in the kitchen, utterly shocked by the facilities. Compared to the large clay stove he grew up using in his rural village, this was heaven. Everything gleamed with modern precision. His gaze landed on a cute apron with a large koi fish design hanging by the counter. It looked brand new. These two girls are so pampered they probably haven't used it once. He shrugged, put it on, and scanned the pantry for ingredients. The fridge held a modest selection. Tomatoes, spinach, celery, and some eggs, all neatly arranged. Albert had probably stocked them just in case Stella needed them. But knowing her, she hadn't touched them. Brian smirked. Figures. He found some flour and rice. Perfect. He thought, I can make a simple noodle bowl. It was quick, warm, and satisfying. His hands moved with ease, shaping the dough, pulling it into thin, delicate strands. It took mere minutes before fresh noodles were laid on the counter, ready to be boiled. His speed was unmatched. Even professional noodle chefs would have been impressed. Harper, lured by the scent, poked her head into the kitchen. "Hey, is it ready yet?" Brian untied his apron, hanging it up. "Yeah, I was just about to call you." Brian slid a bowl across the counter to Harper. They sat down at the table, the warm broth steaming between them. Harper took a bite, and immediately her eyes widened. The noodles were unbelievably good. She wasn't about to admit that. Instead, she slurped her noodles quietly, acting indifferent. Brian, on the other hand, was glad she wasn't complaining. It felt like progress. Brian finished his first serving and stood to get seconds. Before he did, he paused. "You want more?" Harper leaned back, satisfied. "No. But a glass of water would be good." That's when footsteps echoed from the hallway. Stella managed to drag her feet down to the kitchen, still groggy, hair slightly messy. She looked downright miserable. "Something smells amazing." Stella's stomach growled loudly. She hadn't eaten much at the party, and after Brian's glorious act, she was starving. She followed the scent into the kitchen. "Harper, what are you eating?" "It smells so good." Harper looked up, hesitating. Too late. Stella had already picked up her chopsticks and dug in. Harper sighed. "And there she goes." The moment the noodles touched Stella's tongue, she melted. "This is amazing." She devoured another bite. Harper gave her a sympathetic look. Stella, about that—" Stella paused, mid-bite. "What?" Harper leaned forward, smirking. "Brian made it." Stella froze. She stared at the bowl, then at Harper, then back at the bowl. I don't want it." She shoved the chopsticks away, mouth open in betrayal. Harper, barely being able to withhold her laughter, shrugged. "But you already ate it." Stella's eye twitched. Harper continued, voice light and teasing. "First you stare at him at the party. Now you ate his food. At this point you might as well—" "Don't say it," Harper smirked. "Get used to it." Stella groaned, grabbing her head in frustration. "Here's your water," Brian said, handing Harper a glass. Then he paused. His eyes landed on Stella, now sitting in his chair, eating his food. Harper shot him a warning look. Brian blinked obliviously. "Oh." He nodded slowly, realization dawning. Harper grinned, whispering under her breath, "Don't ruin this for her." Brian shrugged, about to turn away, as Stella glared after him. "Why are you just standing there? I can't eat with you watching me." He shrugged. "You didn't seem to mind 5 seconds ago." She huffed, then hesitated. "I don't know about a bodyguard," she muttered, "but I could keep you as a chef." Brian blinked. "That's not my job." She shot him a look. "I'm complimenting you. Don't make me regret it." Then after a pause, "I liked it," she added reluctantly. "Enough to let you come with me to the bank tomorrow." Harper's grin widened. "Wow, promotion already?" Brian nodded slowly. "Noted." The jade pendant warmed against his chest, just for a second. His jaw tightened. He didn't know why, but every instinct stirred. The next morning, rush hour wrapped the streets near Capital Bank in noise and motion. Cars crawled bumper to bumper. Pedestrians streamed across the sidewalks, moving in and out as if it were just another ordinary day. When Stella, Harper, and Brian finally reached the entrance, Albert stopped the car for them to get out before he drove off to find a parking space. Stella grinned at Brian. "Following us? I'm just a student at your school coming in to set up a bank account." Stella looked ahead, took Harper's hand, and proceeded to walk ahead. Brian's jade pendant had a brief glow and a quiver. This took Brian by surprise. What was about to happen at the bank? The pendant gave out a warning flare. But what could possibly go wrong at a bank? Harper and Brian went over to the counter and picked a numbered token. They sat down in the waiting area, and Harper gave Brian a look of approval, indicating he could sit next to her instead of leaving a seat empty between them. As Brian moved in next to Harper, Stella looked away, nodding in disapproval. Suddenly, Brian's jade pendant began to tremble under his shirt. His eyes locked onto a Chicago executive transport van parked outside the entrance of the bank. Tinted windows and the lettering looked like cheap sticker work. Something wasn't right. He instinctively grabbed Harper's hand, making her blush a little. "We must go," he said to the girls. "Let's get out of here." "I still have my work to get done, and you need a bank account," said Stella, swatting his hand off of Harper's. "And what do you think you're doing, grabbing her arm like that? Sorry, but I can't explain it. We just need to leave right now." Before he could say anything further, men in black coats and ski masks entered the bank. It was too late. "Don't move or I'll shoot," the leader yelled, brandishing a dark pistol as he commanded the terrified crowd inside Capital Bank. Brian sighed. "If Stella and Harper had just listened to me, we'd already be out of here. Getting them out now might be impossible." But he didn't blame them. After all, they couldn't have known the danger was waiting at the door. Brian never considered himself heroic. He simply excelled at his work, which often happened to involve acts of heroism. When he accepted a mission, he could not leave unless he had completed it. Right now, his mission was to keep Stella safe and, by extension, protect Harper too. He knew that was a package deal. There was no saving just one. While he knew taking down the robbers one by one would be child's play for him, he'd have to fight the urge to tackle them and keep his eyes on his mark. Stella. Stella and Harper had never faced anything like this before. They trembled, unsure of what would happen next. Bruce, the gang leader, intimidated the crowd. "Put your hands behind your head and lie flat on the floor. I will not hurt those who cooperate, but if you move or fail to do as I say, I will not think twice before I put a bullet through you." A hush fell over the bank. Children were muffled, adults held their breath, and everyone obeyed, lying flat against the cold tile. Faced with armed criminals, they had no choice. If they wanted to live, they had to comply. As Bruce kept the crowd in check, his accomplices stormed the bank counter. After smashing the bank windows with a hammer, they used guns to force the bank staff to put money into designated bags. "Hurry up, what's taking so long?" one of the robbers snapped at a middle-aged employee. "If you keep stalling, I'll shoot you." Yes, the man fumbled. He wasn't very brave. Spooked by the men with the guns, his hands began to tremble. With a thud, a stack of bills fell to the ground, scattering. "Damn it! You did that on purpose, didn't you?" The robber's eyes burned with rage before he pulled the trigger. A shot rang out. The employee screamed, clutching his bleeding arm. Before now, all the gunfire had been blanks, scare tactics. While they had some deterrent effect, they weren't as intense as this shot. This shot was aimed to hurt. The reality hit like a freight train. A heavy silence settled over them, thick with dread. Some squeezed their eyes shut, praying this nightmare would end, while others stole frantic glances at the robbers, searching for any sign of mercy. But no one dared move. Bruce was very satisfied with the intimidating effect of the shot on the crowd and arrogantly looked over the entire bank. "Stella, I'm scared," Harper whispered. Her grip tightened around Stella's arm. Usually the brave one, she now clung to her, trembling. Her face was pale, eyes wide as she darted glances at the gunman. Her breath hitched, and for the first time, Stella saw real fear in her. It's okay, Harper." "I'm right here," Stella murmured, though she could barely steady her own voice. Brian calmly cut them off. "You both have nothing to worry about. I am trained to protect you in such situations." Brian was confident he could tackle the robbers and save the day, but his mission was to protect the girls. He could not sabotage that by playing the hero. Stella's lips twitched as she habitually wanted to blurt out another rude remark toward Brian. She held her words back as she watched his face, determined for action, calculating the robbers' moves. The robbers stuffed the last of the money into their bags. They were almost out when they heard the police sirens closing in on them. The people at the bank sighed in dismay. Ideally, the police arriving would be a good thing. However, if the robbers' escape was compromised, they might resort to alternative measures. The crowd grew concerned. The money the bank would lose didn't matter to them. They wanted to get out of there alive. If the robbers were to keep them hostage, or worse, start shooting people, they were all sitting ducks with targets on their backs. A megaphone from outside blared at full volume. "You are surrounded. Surrendering is your best option." Bruce did not take this warning seriously. He asked one of his goons to use the bank announcement mic to fire back a warning. "If you take a step closer, we will start shooting people." The police warning died down as they discussed strategy. Capital Bank was home to a lot of money that they could not let the robbers get away with. However, there were a lot of civilian lives at stake. Samantha Cassidy of the Metro City Detective Unit rushed to the scene as a stand-in for Cody Marlowe while he was out of town for a conference. As his second-in-command, it was up to her to manage high-priority matters. She was duly informed that the hostage list included not one but two VIPs. The daughter of the billionaire Robert Hart and granddaughter of the political figure and former military officer General Adams. Stella and Harper were more significant than they knew. Therefore, after the threatening words from the criminals inside, Samantha decisively ordered her subordinates to stop communication and avoid provoking the robbers any further. Pleased with the silence outside, Bruce began to inspect the hostages on the floor. Every footstep sent a wave of terror through the room. People barely breathed as he approached, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. Then he stopped. His gaze landed on Stella. "You! Stand up!" Bruce pointed his gun at Stella and commanded. Stella's heart leaped, and she instinctively tightened her grip on Harper's hand, raising her head to look at Bruce. "Oh, quite a pretty one." Bruce chuckled and pointed his gun at Stella again. "I'm talking to you. Stand up." "Me?" Stella rose slowly, gritting her teeth. She had never been so afraid before. Her heart raced, but she was not one to show it. She told herself, "I won't cry. I won't break. I'll be fine." Before she could fully rise, she felt a strong arm on her shoulder, pushing her down. A sharp, confident voice came from behind her. "Take me instead. Let me be your hostage instead," Brian said, standing up beside Stella. "What's so impressive about bullying a little girl?" Stella stared at Brian in utter disbelief. Was he actually standing up for her in a moment like this? Wasn't he afraid of dying? Sure, she knew Brian had taken a lot of money from her father, but no amount of money was worth his life. No one is indifferent to their survival. In an instant, Stella realized Brian wasn't so unlikable after all. At the very least, he was a real man who stood up for her. Would Peter have done the same? She asked herself. Would he have stood up for me in a moment like this? Perhaps he'd be even more afraid than I am, keeping his head down. Why? Why was she comparing Brian to Peter? She shook off the thought. Now was not the time to dwell on irrelevant things. What the hell? Bruce didn't expect someone to butt in. Usually people did everything they could to avoid becoming hostages. But this guy? Was he actually volunteering? Is he an idiot? And who the hell are you? Did I ask for you? Bruce frowned, glaring at Brian with hostility. If you don't want to die, just stay out of the way. You just need a hostage, right? Does it really matter who it is? Brian shrugged. Don't worry, I'll cooperate. Damn it! Bruce was furious. This kid was ruining his plans. A surge of anger rose in his chest. Without hesitation, he raised his gun and pulled the trigger. With Brian's training, even at close range, Bruce would have missed. Ever since he started martial arts, Brian's reflexes had been extremely sharp. He could have dodged the bullet with just a slight turn of his body. His instincts screamed at him to move, to let the bullet pass harmlessly by. But then, he remembered. There was a girl behind him. The bullet was traveling downward. If he dodged, she'd take the hit. If I move, she dies. If I take the hit, I live and can still protect her. Brian gritted his teeth. There was no time. He shifted just enough to take the bullet himself, feeling it tear into his thigh. Though the pain was nothing compared to what he'd endured in training, his brow furrowed from the impact. Luckily, he had positioned himself well, and the bullet lodged in his flesh without damaging the leg bone. The crowd gasped. Stella and Harper simultaneously covered their mouths in shock. Brian had actually been shot, but they saw it clearly. Brian could have dodged. Instead, he took the bullet to protect the girl behind him. Stella's gaze shifted toward the girl lying behind Brian. Her expression hardened. Wow, someone's really asking for trouble. Bruce was very surprised. Boss, more cops are gathering outside. One of the robbers whispered to Bruce. Bruce cursed under his breath. Damn it! He pressed the gun against Brian's head. Since you're so eager to be a hostage, let's make it official. Clara, keep an eye on him. On it! Clara smirked, aiming her gun at Brian. Kid, playing the hero isn't as easy as it looks. Brian didn't speak. He simply calculated the odds of whether to take action here or wait a bit. Here, the gangsters were too scattered, which was not ideal for him to act. Secondly, there were too many people in the crowd. If any large-scale chaos occurred, it would hinder his ability to make his move. Girl, get up. Bruce focused on Stella, once again aiming his gun at her. Stella no longer felt afraid. She shot a warning look at Harper before she stood up. Let's go, Bruce ordered, pressing the muzzle against her head. Brian frowned. Why was Bruce so fixated on Stella? Was it because she was pretty? Rich? One thing was certain. She was being deliberately targeted. Taking one hostage was enough to negotiate with the police. It didn't matter who, as long as they had leverage. Bruce's man grabbed the mic. We're taking hostages. All cops back up. 100 yards. If anyone follows our vehicle, the hostages die. Samantha, the lead detective, was not happy about these demands, but she had to think about the hostages inside. Left with no choice, she ordered, fall back. She had never liked surrounding the bank as a show of force. It only pressured criminals into acting out. She had suggested a different strategy, covertly tracking them post-escape, but her idea had been dismissed as too unconventional. Bruce felt a sense of victory as he stepped outside, dragging Stella along. Clara followed with her gun aimed at Brian, while a third gunman opened the van door. "Stella!" Albert shouted, standing beside Samantha. His face turned pale at the sight of her in the criminal's hands. "Sir, do you know the hostage personally?" Samantha asked, feeling a vague sense of unease in her heart. "That's Robert Hart's daughter, Stella," Albert said, his voice filled with anxiety. "What?" Samantha's stomach dropped. How could the criminals have chosen Robert Hart's daughter as their hostage? Robert Hart was a powerful businessman. If something happened to his daughter, there'd be serious consequences. The more you fear something, the more likely it is to happen. Samantha quickly grabbed her walkie-talkie to report the current situation to Commissioner Ryder. "Sir, among the hostages is Stella Hart, Robert Hart's daughter." The police commissioner stiffened. "We need to handle this carefully. Absolutely no rash moves." But the snipers are in position. We have a 90% chance of neutralizing the target, Samantha argued. You said it yourself, 90%. What about the other 10%? What if Miss Hart gets hurt? Then neither of us walks away from this unscathed, Captain Benjamin snapped. Follow the criminal's demands for now, then we plan. I understand, Samantha remarked in frustration. She would have taken the risk, but without support she had no choice. Bruce and his crew climbed into the van with Stella and Brian before speeding away from the bank. Samantha clenched her fists, helpless as they escaped. Albert frantically tried to contact Robert Hart, but the call wouldn't go through. God help us when he finds out his daughter is in danger. Why were the robbers targeting Stella? Did Brian step forward as a hero, or walk straight into a carefully laid trap? Can Brian protect Stella now that he's wounded and outnumbered?
Install the Pocket FM app now within 1 minute to listen to the first 10 episodes for free. Download now before the offer disappears.